Okay, today we are finishing up the first, excuse me, yeah, it's finishing the first section of Chapter 6, Operations with Polynomials, and today we're going to talk about the other three objectives, which is a special case of multiplying polynomials using FOIL. Then we're going to talk about multiplying sum and difference, and then we're going to talk about squaring polynomials. So, first off, you should be familiar, but whenever you multiply two binomials, ax plus b, cx plus d, those are two binomials because I have two terms in each, we use a method called FOIL. And FOIL is just an acronym because each of these letters stands for something, and it spells a word. And F, remember, stands for the first terms. So what we have done is multiplied ax times cx, which is what we've written here. The O stands for the outside terms, so that's AX times B. The I stands for the inside terms, that's B times CX. And the L stands for last, and that's B times D. So what you need to remember mostly is the word FOIL and what it stands for. First, outside, inside, last. So let's do some examples. Here are two binomials. Each one has two terms in it. That makes it a binomial. So when we multiply this, we're going to use our FOIL. So the first terms are 4x cubed times 5x cubed plus the outside, which is 4x cubed times 1, plus the inside, which is 3 times 5x cubed, plus the last, which is 3 times 1. Then we're going to multiply that out, or simplify it, however you wish. That gives us 20x to the 6, because we add the exponents. We talked about that in the last lesson. Then anything times 1, 4x cubed, 3 times 5, 15x cubed, and then 3 times 1. And then you combine your like terms, which is why I was put them in a different color so that you can see the blue and the red are actually like terms, and they will combine to give you 19x cubed. Remember, whenever you're multiplying, that if you have a term, the sign that comes in front of it goes with the term. So if there's a minus sign with it, then that goes with it. Okay? So here's another example. Here are my first terms. Here is O for outside. Then next we have the inside terms, and then we have the last terms. So when you multiply that out, 5x times x, 5x times 7, 2 times x, and 2 times 7, we get 5x squared plus 35x plus 2x plus 14. And again, we can combine our two middle terms, giving us 37x. So we end up with 5x squared plus 37x plus 14. Okay, so that's the first case that we have. The second one we have is when we multiply the sum and difference of two terms. Okay, what does that look like? Here are two binomials that look exactly the same. One of them is a sum and one of them is a difference. But notice that my terms are the same. And when you multiply those out, you just have to remember to square the first term, square the last term, and subtract them. It is always that way. Okay? These two terms are called conjugates. Conjugates, if you want to write that down. Nice bonus question. So an example would look like x minus 5 times x plus 5. They look exactly the same, except for one has a minus and one has a plus. So you just square the first term, square the last term. It's always minus. And when you simplify that, you get x squared minus 25. Another example you have to be aware of is if it's just x, it's pretty simple. But if you have 5a to the fourth, so if one of those terms has something more involved with it, then you need to remember to put that in parentheses when you square it. So 5a to the fourth means you got to square the 5, and then a to the fourth times 2, or a to the fourth squared, excuse me, is going to be 4 times 2. So we would have 25a to the 8th, and then of course 6 squared is 36. Okay, that's our second case. Now our third case, the square of a binomial sum. You already have it on your paper. All right, this again is a binomial. We have two terms. We're squaring it, and it is a sum. So when you multiply this out, I don't want you to FOIL. I want you to know the shortcut because in the next section we got to go backwards, so you need to recognize this and it will make your factoring much easier. So you're going to square the first term, square the last term, and this middle term is what you get when you multiply these two together times 2. So you can kind of remember by looking at that that's how you get that middle term. Now, if you want to know where this comes from, I'm happy to show it to you. But more importantly, I want you to remember the shortcut. So x plus 7 quantity squared, I'm going to square that first term. The last one is going to be that squared, and then I'm going to multiply x times 7 times 2. So I'm writing it out like that. Square the first term, square the last term, x times 7 times 2. And when you simplify it, x squared plus 14x plus 49. One that's got a little bit more involved, 3x plus 7. Square the first term, so we put that one in parentheses. Square the last term, and then 2 times the product of the terms. And when we simplify, this becomes 9x squared, and then we're going to have 42x, and then we're going to have 4 plus 49. Okay, that is the square of a binomial sum, the square of a binomial difference, okay, just like what we did, except for there's a minus sign instead of a plus sign. And it's going to be exactly the same, except for that second term is going to be minus. That's all it is. So you're doing the same process, x minus 8 quantity squared. I'm going to square the first term, square the last term, then multiply them together times 2. So x squared minus x times 8 times 2 plus 8 squared. And then we simplify it. X squared minus 16x plus 64. And then our last example, again, a little more involved here, so you want to put it in parentheses to make sure you square it properly. 2 times the product of the terms, and then 6 squared. And again, if this is minus, that's minus, just like we did over here. So we simplify it out, and we're going to get 25y squared minus 60y plus 36. Okay, so the last thing, just to sum up what we did, we had 4 cases that we talked about. The first one was FOIL. The second one was multiplying a sum and a difference, or you can write multiplying conjugates. And then the third one was the square of a binomial sum. And then the fourth one was a square of a binomial difference. And if you want to group these together in preparation for the next lesson, these last 2, 3, and 4 are the same. So write out here PST because they become perfect square trinomials. And that will lead us into our next section. That's all that we have. If you have any questions, please come and ask.